Hi there, Zarina.
Hi, Sharon.
Shall we introduce ourselves?
Sure.
Okay. My name is Sharon Kallis, and I am the lead artist and executive director for Earth Hand Gleaners. And we're here today to talk about mordanting. Over to you, Z.
Hello, I'm CZarina, and I've been a member of Earth Hand Gleaners for many, many years. Some of my favorite things have been the dye garden, co-op, and all the natural dyes we've learned together.
So Z is going to be teaching for the second time this year, an online dye guild for people to do their own dye experiments at home. And one of the things that we've been having conversations around, the sort of support documents we're putting up on YouTube for folks, is the gap as of yet for mordanting cellulose fibers. And so Z and I thought it would be good to just film that together and have it as kind of a conversation, which hopefully is going to be entertaining. It will be unedited, just stating that at the very beginning. So welcome along for the ride of whatever the next, let's say, 30 minutes is going to be. Let's see if we can keep ourselves contained in 30 minutes, shall we?
Yeah, good idea. Should we talk about safety first?
Yes, do you want to start with safety? That's perfect.
Sure. One of the main things to remember is you're playing with soda ash and aluminum acetate. So we do want to wear masks, which everybody has, and eyeglasses, because you don't want those kinds of things in your eyes and your face too. And I mean, I always wear an apron because you just never know when you're dyeing and using colors. Gloves for when you're mixing your acetates. Basically, those are it.
Awesome. And the other key thing to that is to, even if you're using, I use my home kitchen all the time for dyeing, but yeah. I'm very, very strict about having separate pots, separate spoons, separate stir sticks. All of that is dye relegated. Jars, etc. Yeah, so being able to write what you're doing on your wooden spoons so that nobody is going to inadvertently pick it up and use it. Keep a separate pot. You know, you can kind of get for yourself a small scale kit that is your home kitchen dyeing, and keep that separate from your food related stuff. And
keep your windows open if you're doing it inside.
Awesome.
Yeah, and don't breathe it in if you can, all the fumes or anything.
Yeah, awesome. All right, and I usually do when I'm I have a balcony that is normally not too windy, so it's a good spot. I can sit at the table out on my balcony, and that's where I do all of my kind of measuring, etc. The scale that I use is just a really simple little postage. I think these usually are $25 to $35 that you can pick them up, and it's really useful to have. The thing with cellulose fibers compared to protein, wool and silk, is that there's so many steps to it. So people get really overwhelmed by it. But I think one of the key things that I always liken it to is it's like making a pot of soup. If you've never made soup before, soup is really intimidating because it seems like this magic that comes about from liquid and various vegetables, etc. And then you've got this really delicious, completely different thing at the end. And so a dye pot can be like that. To get color to attach to cellulose fibers can be challenging, but there are basically 5 steps. And if you just give yourself all the time in the world, and as both Z and I would probably speak to, do your mordanting well ahead of when you want to be doing your dyeing. You can always store your mordanted fabrics, and then when the opportunity for a dye pot presents itself, you can just roll with it.
Okay. Yeah, and label them.
Label them. Labels are smart.
Oh, speaking of labels, actually, while we're there, I'm using this. You can even use Tyvek from building sites. You know, the Tyvek they put on. So, but apparently it's the same sort as the Amazon envelopes. And I've boiled them for hours with just a Sharpie, writing the name on it. Just little labels. I've got like a whole pile of them here. Right. Then I just write on them and attach your fibers. So there's a hack.
That's smart. I like that.
Or you
Yeah.
can buy fancy labels, which I don't have. So
So let's start with a list to begin off.
scouring.
So the first thing is, and I'm just going to read off the top. First thing we're going to talk about is scouring, and then we're going to move on to tannins and to our alum, which is actually the mordant, to chalking, and then finally it's the dye pot.
Yes,
Okay,
and
so
it's alum acetate, not to be confused with
yes, yes.
sulfate.
So we'll speak to that when we get to alum, and then scouring. Do you want to say something about scouring to start?
Sure. So with scouring, you can get the fancy stuff, which is Centripol, which works like magic. And honestly, if I'm doing something like gifts for somebody, I usually do a couple of tablespoons of Centripol with a couple of tablespoons of soda ash. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
And then I boil it for about an hour. But if it's scouring, you can also do in the washing machine with just soda ash as well thrown in. And I've actually used, if it's not white, completely plain white materials, I've used the ash from the camping fires or people's fireplaces that they collect.
Yeah.
I just I sieve it and then save it and then put it in. I think you mentioned cheesecloth before. Something like that, and just soak it for days and days in water, and then use that water.
Awesome.
Or I've actually also been lazy and thrown it in the washing machine as well, and it's done the trick. But on a really hot wash, so between 120, 140 degrees Celsius in the washing machine. But then I prefer doing it on a big pot on the stove if it's smaller items, and it works really well with just Centripol on its own too.
Sweet. Okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Scouring, the reason that scouring is really important is because if you were looking at, for instance, fresh, like your own homegrown flax for linen or stinging nettle, any of those, raw fibers that you've processed, they still have a lot of vegetable oils attached to them. And those need to be, and pectins, and those all need to be stripped away so that the surface of the fiber can actually take on the dye. Otherwise, you end up with very kind of sketchy, spotty. And so likewise, if you have finished fiber, that has come fabric off the bolt, it's going to have finishing agents on it that you need to strip off. Or if you've got something from Value Village, you're going to need to take off any built up layers of softening, whatever people put in their washing machine. So there's all of that kind of buildup that's on the surface of the fiber that you need to make sure is removed. And so you need something really alkali, is basically what we're talking about.
Yes, and I did notice that, old vintage things that have been used over many years, you'll notice the water is quite clear when you boil it for a whole hour. Yeah. But the really new stuff you buy, and speaking of cellulose, I guess you've got cotton, you've got linen, rayon, hemp.
Yeah.
What else?
Nettle. Any of the vegetable fibers are going to be kind of in that category. Yeah. So things basically, if it's not from an animal.
Yes. And when they sell it at the store, it's so pretty and white and clean, but it's got a lot of stuff that actually ends up being quite brown water.
Yeah, exactly. So the only thing I've ever used for scouring is borax and dish detergent. So it's just because I'm probably a combination of cheap and lazy, and both of these are just in my house. So I just put probably a couple of tablespoons of borax with a squirt of my dish detergent. Use the dish detergent as opposed to clothing detergent in a pot of water, and I bring that up to a boil, and then kind of a low simmer for about 45 minutes, and the water will be, this is when I'm doing linen, the water is almost the color of that paper. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
It's amazing how much comes out. And then, and you want your fibers to just be able to always move really fluidly through that liquid, don't have things so jammed in. So the pot of water is just like, you know, a decent size amount of water. And then this borax is not going to be as high an alkali as soda ash. So you can use a little bit more than what you would use for soda ash. But 45 minutes of scouring time, and then rinse really, really well. The rinsing can take quite a bit of time, and that's where, again, you want gloves. If you do feel the water, it feels very, very soapy, that alkali feeling. And you can use a bit of vinegar water to kind of return the pH to your skin if you need to, if you get it on your skin. But yeah, so that's basically the scouring process. So with anything like this, when you know you've got materials you want to dye, if you even just think about getting through a step, I normally give myself a week leading up to, if I want to do a dye pot, let's say next Sunday, I would be scouring today, knowing that Monday is scouring, and then Tuesday is tannin, and then Wednesday is, you know, and then each day I'm doing another.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And, you know, as long as you mark your bags, that's really important, because you will forget, trust me. After years and years, you won't forget. So, and it all looks the same.
It does. So I don't put a label right on my garments that are going into the water like Z does. But what I do is just afterwards, I just put an elastic band or a string around and just put a note that says scoured.
Yes, exactly.
I know that's my scoured bag.
Yeah, if I do a big bulk, I usually just do that. I put it all in one bag and have a big note firmly attached to the bag, because those tend to fly away too. But when I do scour, especially new linens, I do it for more than an hour. And then I will get rid of that really brown water and give it another load of clean water and do it again, and then rinse it really well. But rinsing is really important, because you do end up getting streaks in your later processes. So
and you want to have as much of that those oils and pectins and whatnot out of the material, and have it nice and clean and ready to go with. Okay, are we ready to move on to tannin? Our next
tannin.
step?
Oh dear.
Tannin.
Yay.
Okay, so tannin, I have written down here 7% WOF. What does WOF stand for, Zarina?
Weight of fiber, Sharon. I didn't know it was a test. Weight of fiber, so important to weigh your fiber, right?
Weight of fiber, absolutely. So one of the key things, anytime you're reading any books on dyeing, you will come across WOF as kind of a key or a code, and that basically is just the weight of your fiber when it's dry. So a really core thing, after you have scoured your fiber and you've rinsed it out and it's dry, that is the time that is the best place to actually take a measurement of the garment or that bag of wool, whatever it is. In this case, it would not be wool, it would be your linen or whatever, cotton t-shirts, whatever it is. Weigh them and know what your weight is when it's dry, because after that, things are suddenly going to be wet when they're going from A to B, and you will be like, oh, wait a minute, what was the measurement on that? So yeah,
save a lot of time.
Yeah. So on my note here was 7% or 12%. And the point being that there are, when I am doing this using the MyWa products, there are two different gall nuts that you will find. One of them is an extract, and one of them is just ground gall nut. So the extract is going to be more expensive, and it is very fast to use. Because it's an extract, it's going to just dissolve in water very quickly, and you need less of that. You only need 7% weight of fiber for this. The gall nut is going to run cheaper, but it's ground, but it is not dissolved yet. So you're going to need to simmer that for probably 45 minutes to an hour to just pull and extract all of the tannins out of the gall nut. And then for that, you're also going to want to use a little bit more. So 10 to 15%, you can round off to 12.
Weight of fiber.
Weight of fiber. Yeah. And the thing that everybody loves about gall nut is that it is in the, I think it's gallic acid organic tannin, I should say, family, where it's a clear tannin. So if you think about a cup of tea, and the tea is high in tannins, and that's what stains your teeth, that's a different tannin that is going to give you a brown tone as a baseline for your dye. So Zarina's got a really good example there.
Actually do, yeah. Do you want me to show it now?
Yeah.
So this would be, I mean, it's, you know, just a little off-white kind of look that you get from the Gall Nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also remember that when you write it, when you do buy the extract, I've literally put it in red there because I have made the mistake of using the 10 to 15% of the good stuff, which you really don't need because it's one of the most highest content nuts with the tannin content.
Yeah.
You don't need that much. But oh yeah, so I was going to say that's the positive about Gall Nut, that it's clear. It gives you a clear fabric. But I have in the guild last year, I was trying to say use what you have in your garden. So sumac leaves are really high as well. Sorry, I don't know the full Latin names off by heart. And rhubarb leaves. Like I just save all the dried rhubarb leaves and then I powder it. But that's also really high. But then the color difference is that you get something like this against the white, maybe.
There you go.
And then with the sumac, which is all hanging there, I get this. It's kind of it's almost clear, to be honest, and it depends what you're going to dye with it. You know,
slightly green tone,
slightly green, like light mint tone. So really, and that's free, and you know, on highways and
that's awesome.
Highways, so that's also something. But the only thing with that is that you don't know exactly how much. So I just, when I'm, you know, I get some kind of look, I kind of judge the color of the water and figure that that's how I go. And it's worked out so far. So. And
so what you could do there is the same as when we are dyeing our plant matter. I don't know how clear this would be, but you know, if you're using your plant matter, you would dry it, and then you use basically 100% weight of fiber of your flowers to your fabric. And so in this case, if you've dried your sumac leaves or your rhubarb leaves, you could go from that 7% or that 15%. I know for fresh plants, in dyeing, 200% is what Anna Haywood Jones has always figured. 200% for fresh flowers.
Wow, I thought it was less. There you go.
So, and I think, you know, every plant is going to be slightly different. But so this is where, you know, understanding and knowing what the baseline recipe expectation or recommendations are, and then you just hack that and figure it out for yourself. The one thing on that is the rhubarb leaves are toxic, so do be careful. And even though you think it's a food-friendly thing, again, back to using pots that are not your regular kitchen pots. You want to use things that are, And
even when you're grinding them in your blender, you have a blender set up just for dyes, some cheap blender you can get from the secondhand store. And don't breed the powders, you know, that's really good to remember. And then the other thing with the Gall Nut is when you do the tannins, whatever tannins you do, I don't feel like you have to rinse it really, you know, really strong or thoroughly. I don't rinse it like crazy. I just do a light rinse.
At the end.
At the end of, because after each step you should do a rinse.
Yes.
But you don't have to go so vigorously like with the scouring to the.
And so with before you put anything into whatever your mordant is, you want to use wetted fibers. And so that's something, again, to kind of have the forethought to think ahead. If you know you're going to be dyeing later in the day or mordanting later in the day, put the fibers that are already weighed in a bucket of water and let them sit for at least 30 minutes. Really, things, cotton should sit in water for about an hour at least before you are putting it then into the tannin, because you want it to be really well wet and saturated already with water before it goes into any of the steps, basically.
All the nooks and crannies. Overnight would be best, really, but
and so how I do my tannin, regardless of which tannin I use, and out of curiosity, these oak galls do not happen on our trees here in the Vancouver area. We don't have the insect that creates this gall. They do in Washington. In Oregon. And I'm not sure about Washington. So it'd be really interesting to sort of see where's that line. If anybody here is watching this and knows the answer to that, inquiring minds want to know. I did pick up, these are oak galls that I've got powdered in a bag that I brought home from Spain at the residency that we go to. So it was really exciting to actually recognize the oak galls on trees there.
Yeah, because some of them, some of the European ones, or even the Eastern European ones have, it's a darker shade, like even the actual tannin powder looks green, right?
Yeah.
Or darker.
Yeah. I think Janie Chang has been doing some research using a type of gall nut from Turkey in her salmon leather tanning, if I remember correctly. I think it's come from Turkey, and it's a slightly different color, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what I do, regardless of what tannin I'm using, my method is to make sure it's either already dissolved and simmered. I put my wet fabric into the dye pot and I am stirring it. I let it simmer on low for about 40 minutes. And then I take it off of the heat and I just leave it in a pot overnight. So the more tannin you can have saturated in your fabric, the deeper and brighter your colors will be. And that's the one thing I've found with cotton. You don't need to leave it overnight. You can leave it for a couple of hours. But if I leave things overnight, if I've given myself lots of lead up time for my dyeing, I do find I get much better results. And then when I pull things out, that's when I give it a rinse. And as Z said, you don't have to be super obsessive about the rinsing, but I do give it a good rinse. And the reason for that is my next step is the alum. And the alum isn't going to bond with the cloth all on its own. And this is why we need to actually even use a mordant to begin with. I like this kind of analogy of, it's like children that are in a group, and some kids may not like each other so much and might not be inclined to hold hands, but there might be the friend that they both like. And so they're each going to hold hands with that child. And so tannin is that middle child that everybody likes. The tannin is going to bond.
You have the mother that forces them.
There you go. The tannin is going to bond to the cloth, and the alum is going to bond to the tannin. And the tannin is what's holding those two together.
That's
and then the dye is going to hold on hands with the alum at the end. And so you've got this chain of linking that happens. And so if we end up having a piece of cotton that has been very dutifully tannined and then not rinsed out, and you've got all kinds of surface tannin that's just sitting on the surface and is not actually penetrated into the cloth, and that then goes into the alum, or into a dye pot, what can happen is that your dye or your alum is attaching to what's still sitting on the surface. And when you finally wash it, you lose that color. And so that's why you want to rinse at the end of each step.
Yeah. Right.
All right.
So alum acetate and alum potassium sulfate.
Is it time to move on? Okay, so we are moving on now to step number 3.
We could go on about tannins, but
we could, but I think
the thing to remember with tannins, going back to tannins, is that some of them are dyes. They're actually proper dyes too, right? So you can do that. You can. I forgot to mention the pots that you use to do anything. Make sure they're cleaned really well. Have a stainless steel bowl cleaning to do, after everything that you do, clean them, and use stainless steel pots. That's what I do best, unless we can go into another world with aluminum pots and things like that. But don't have any rust inside, because that also
Let's come back to that, because I have my rust pot that I want to show and tell the nightmare story at the end. Okay.
I should go get mine then.
All right, so alum at 8% weight of fiber. Now, this is where it can be complicated to know the difference of alum sulfate, which if I hold that up, you can see it's a big crystal. It almost looks like sugar, the way light bounces off of it and the way the bits kind of roll on themselves. So this is what you use for wool and silk Mind you, I've read a lot of silk is done with the other alum acetate, but
Mm-hmm.
the way I always think of it is this costs half as much and you use twice as much. So for all the cellulose, what we want is the one that is expensive, but you use half the amount.
Exactly. And it's
Right.
very soft powder. And even when you
Yes.
open the lid, the powders can fly into your face. So always be masked up. And
This is one that, yeah. So
oh yeah, see that? Yeah.
you can just see how it just really kind of softly rolls, and it's such a fine powder. You definitely, if you can, do this outside,
Yeah.
do it where it's still, and absolutely wear a mask for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And usually when we talk about it, we say alum, and when we say alum, we mean alum potassium sulfate. That's for the protein fibers.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about alum acetate, we usually talk about cellulose fibers.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So the alum acetate, again, its basic is 8% weight of fiber.
Yeah.
What is so fantastic, I think, about the alum for this is that it is really a cold system. I will measure out how much I need, and then I can pour boiling water into it slowly. And again, like, don't keep your face right over the pot because the powder does poof. But you can add your boiling water and it just dissolves very quickly. You can do this in a large white plastic bucket and have your hot water in the white plastic bucket, and you just need enough water that your materials are going to move around smoothly in. And then I put my wetted, tannin rinsed fabric into that bucket, and I put a folded up towel over the top to just hold the heat in.
Yeah,
and
or a lid.
Leave that for a couple of hours. Again, I've left it overnight. It doesn't really matter. You could leave it in for a week if you forget it and walk away.
And
fine.
Yeah, and when you do the little mix first, don't just throw the powder into the pot. Like, use hot water in another little container.
Yes.
And then stir it with, I have one of those, one of these little things, but a smaller one for just that powder. And
perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Again, mark your tools. But the best thing I like about alum acetate is that you can save it. I use it twice more, but then you don't need 8%. You'd need like 2 to 4. No, you need 4%. So it's half the amount you need. And I use it twice more, and then it's reduced, and then you can actually throw the water in the garden rather than you do have to be careful how you dispose of your waters. Yeah. So 4% weight of fiber if you're reusing the water, and you do it at least twice.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And that's, our friend, Erin Fahey, who lives off grid in forest in the Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
She was fantastic to follow dyeing one day because, she doesn't have electricity. Everything is, kind of building a fire from sticks on the property. And her way of mordanting is just that she's got really large Rubbermaid bins that she keeps stored underneath the table. And they've got rainwater in them. And she just tops up a little bit of alum, and she keeps blankets or clothing, garments that she's found and is prepped for dyeing are just kind of living in the buckets. And so she's got such an easy, low-key way to just top up, as you say, 4%.
Yes, exactly.
Just kind of top that up and not having to start at the 8% every time. And that water just keeps getting used and keeps getting used. So there's no wastage there.
No waste, yeah. And you could use the sun's energy, right? I mean, you could do dyeing. And that it's just a longer process. But if you don't care, most times we forget, right? Anyway, what we've got in our pots. So
awesome. So, and then of course, when the alum, when it comes out, I've noticed that Charlotte from Maywa and her notes always talks about hanging, like letting your mordant drip off and drip dry and then rinse. I normally drop the plot at that point and I just pull things out and I rinse them right away, rightly or wrongly. That's what I do. And I still get good results. So I've been happy with that.
Yeah. I
What do
guess
you do?
my rule is I usually leave it at least a minimum of 2 hours in the bucket with the alum.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I think that's super
And then
important.
when you pull it out, are you rinsing right away or do you hang it to drip dry
No,
before you?
no, I don't do Charlotte's Whey. I
Okay,
just rinse it. Yeah,
okay, all right,
yeah. And
all
again,
right.
I lightly rinse because then you're doing,
Yes,
I'll wait
yeah.
for you for the next.
No, okay. Are we ready? Is that it for Awa?
I
It's so
guess so, yes.
simple, right? It's just, and it's like you don't need to do it over a stove. You can have like a big white bucket with a lid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do remember as a beginner, I was always confused about alum potassium sulfate and alum acetate. And just the ACE, it's, you phonetically say and then I remembered cotton, like the C for cotton, and that's
Oh,
how I
nice.
remembered it.
That's how you
But
remember it.
it just took that simple little light bulb moment, and I
Okay,
always remembered it. But yeah, you do get confused.
awesome. I
Yeah.
like that.
And
I like
of
that.
course, if you get into your experimental, like you were saying, you could even do, there is a way of doing the tannin with the alum potassium sulfate as well.
Yeah.
But this will just keep it simple.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so last step before is chalking or wheat bran dip. So chalking. So calcium carbonate, also known as ground chalk. That's what this is referring to. And this step is just really something that does not need to happen before you dye. I normally would do this step right before things go into the dye pot, is how I do it. And it's this weird little thing that honestly, sometimes I forget and sometimes I remember. I'm a little, this is where I kind of drop the plot. If I'm going to drop the plot in this process, it's going to be the chalking. But technically, the chalk does help set the mordant to the cloth. So it gives it the kind of final bite required, I guess, before your dye comes into contact with your cloth.
Yes, it's true. And then again, you can use that, how much would you do? Like 500? So say half a kilo of fibres, you would use about 2 tablespoons, maybe. No, how much would I use? 10%. No, I think I'd use a cup, wouldn't I? Of
for that amount of fiber, probably.
Kilo, yeah. But you can use that same water for up to 10 kilos.
Right.
So again, it's just a matter of keeping the containers of the liquids, because you can use it again. You don't have to just use it for the one load of processing that you do.
How I approach chalking. So the alternate to actually kind of purchasing the chalk is if you've got a wheat bran in your baking cupboard. I just take a piece of cheesecloth and probably, like a good sized handful of wheat bran. So let's say that's kind of going to be probably 3/4 of a cup, just shy of that I pour into the cheesecloth, and I knot the top of it, and I pour boiling water over that wheat bran, and I can kind of see there is just some discoloration in the water. It just, I don't know how to describe it. It's not quite miso looking, but it doesn't look like pure water either. And I have that liquid that I just do a dip before things go into the dye pot. And then when I'm done, I pull that cheesecloth out, I let it dry in the sun, and I save it in my dye, and I will use that same container, that same little cheesecloth ick bundle for a couple of seasons.
That's a good idea. Yeah. And you do that, even the chalk that I use, you make sure it all settles at the bottom, right? So you do have to stir it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is like a whitish kind of liquid looking thing, but not really white. Yeah. Just unclear a bit.
So, just because I think it's funny as hell, when I was pulling out my dye stuff, which I have not had out, honestly, in almost a year now, maybe even over a year, I had wheat germ in with my dye, sitting in with my chalk, which apparently I probably used wheat germ in the past instead of the wheat bran. I have no notes to say whether or not this worked effectively.
Keep notes.
So, feel free to try it and see.
If you have any If you have any horse-friendly people and people who go to, what do they call, equestrian places,
Yeah.
wheat bran apparently is what they feed horses, and it's really
Right.
cheap there. But the supermarket has it. It's not that cheap at the
It's not that
supermarket.
cheap.
So
Yeah.
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 And according to the Miva sheets, it says 50 grams of chalk, calcium carbonate,
Mhm.
to 5 liters of water, and in that you can do up to 10 kilos of fibers. So
Awesome. Okay. All
not
right.
bad.
And
Yeah.
so that's, again, you've got like a bucket that just becomes your dedicated chalking bucket that's marked
Yeah.
as such. And then that just gets pulled out. And if those
Yeah.
buckets have got lids on them, then you can stack them up and they can take up a smaller profile on your deck or your balcony or whatever corner of your home.
Label the buckets.
Yes, label the buckets is smart. Okay. And then at that point, you are ready for the dye pot.
Yeah.
That wheat germ,
rinsed and
or wheat bran does not need, I'm reading the label wheat germ now, it's going to throw me off. The wheat bran or the chalk does not need to be rinsed off. That is just like a final dip and then into the dye.
Yeah. And then you're ready.
Then you're ready. And that's that.
Any
Awesome.
questions?
So I have got a few things that I thought, out of curiosity, I would just grab some garments of clothing and like a ball of linen, and just, I did up a little scale. I measured things just to kind of give people a sense if the scale is overwhelming and is out of your reach for even what you can get your head around having to find and purchase and then store for the amount of dyeing you're going to do. I figured if I did some measurements of a few things, and then that gives even just a ballpark ratio for folks to know. So we could play this as a guessing game. Do you want to guess?
Oh gosh, here we go. Sure, why not?
Well, you'll start off very erratic, but then we'll start to see. Okay, so this is half a ball of linen that I've spun. Yes. So
linen is heavy.
Linen is heavy. So how many grams do you think that is?
20.
It's 50.
Wow.
50 grams.
Okay.
So there it is.
There you go.
Hand. And so what that amounted to, the tannin and the alum, it's basically 4 grams each. Now, what was interesting to note is that when I measured out the gall nut from the alum, gall nut is much heavier than alum. So when I'm looking to just kind of what those amounts look like, I need less of physical space of the gall nut than I did the alum. So it was approximately half a tablespoon of gall nut to a heaping teaspoon.
Yeah, so
alum.
Yeah, and about 1 teaspoon would be about 5 grams. Yeah, if you're going that way. Yeah, and a tablespoon would be like 10, 15. They usually say 15 grams. They usually say,
15 grams is a
tablespoon.
Tablespoon. Okay, all right. So tank top. A medium tank top. So our linen ball was 50 grams. How many did you say?
Oh, no, I'll say 70.
70. Bing, bing, bang. You are right on. Okay, so this was like a scant tablespoon of alum and a little bit less for a tank top, or for the tannin. Oh, I like this game. You didn't know we were going to play. I didn't know I was going to make it a game until.
Then we'll compete about the iron pot.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so a black medium t-shirt. The black of, obviously this would not go into a dye pot, but it was like I had.
T-shirts are really, really, really heavy. So I'd say 110.
185.
Oh my goodness. See, that's why I don't do t-shirts so much.
185. So that is basically 13 grams for the 7% tannin, or 15 grams for the alum at 8%. So that's looking at basically for so you use a proper tablespoon. You said 15 grams was a tablespoon. Yeah. When I used this like soup spoon, it was 1 3/4 of that for my 15 grams.
Yeah, wow.
Now,
when you get one of these containers from Miva, they're 250 grams. That's the tiny ones.
Yeah, so it gives you a sense of
50
how
grams.
far that would go.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is a linen shirt that is a full,
Wow.
you know, it's a white. I know, I think you've admired the
mine.
shirts and you've watched it in the past.
Yes.
I taught you with it now, and it's virgin whiteness that has not seen a dye pot. So that is as a big loose linen full shirt.
220.
Up higher?
Oh, 250?
260.
What?
260. I'm very impressed at how good you
Wow.
are at your this is like the Price is Right. The weight, it's come on down, Zarina.
I have to keep thinking your size, Sharon, your size.
So 20.8 grams was the 8%
Wow.
alum
Yeah.
on this. So again, that is 2.5 of my soup spoons.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
All right, now this is a weird little square that is not very straight edges, but I liked it as the notion that it's kind of like a handkerchief,
70?
you know, kind of thing
Oh, that's cute.
that you would make to, you know, as a little bandana, tie, whatever.
Maybe 60, 70.
50.
50. There you go. I was going to say 50.
So actually it is the same weight when I just kind of stretch it all up in my hand. That is the same weight as that ball of linen.
Yeah.
Okay, and then last but not least,
A sheet?
this was, just a piece of linen that I had in my scrap pile.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's a narrow width. What is that? Probably 45 centimeters. And there's about 2 meters there, maybe just shy of 2 meters as a scrap of fabric.
Over 200.
It's less, actually, it's 145.
Oh, come on.
Which was
It must be really thin.
It is thin. It is thin, but it also made me realize that this shirt has buttons on it that are quite big.
Oh yeah, probably shell buttons or something.
Probably put my weight up on this shirt. Anyway, so yeah, that's great. Now, all of those things that I had, there is that ball of linen, tank top, t-shirt, the other linen, the big white shirt, and the kerchief. All of that combined was approximately 60, about 60 grams. So that little bag that I had marked from traveling for a project, that is 67 grams. So that little bag there is about what I would need to do all of those garments.
Yeah, which is a good point. You know, when you weigh the garments, weigh them separately. But when I do all the steps, especially if they're not, you know, different colors, then I do the whole lot together and I just take a total. But I do know what each one weighs because when you dye them, you're not necessarily going to put them in the same dye pot either, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you want to know how much it is then. Of course, you can redo it, but.
So there is the sheet that I had done up.
That's awesome, Sharon.
When I was just kind of looking at this. So for each object, I've got what the actual weight was, and then my alum and my or my tannin and my alum, and then I was just doing kind of what would an approximate measure look like on there.
Fantastic. Put it back a bit. Oh, I guess people could always put it back a little bit so then they could see the whole thing.
Right there, is that good?
Back a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, that's great, Sharon. Thanks.
Okay, do you want to, I think this concludes the first part of our dye session. And I think we're doing okay on time. I'm not actually sure how long we've been recording for.
Yeah.
This is
good idea.
That has been my kind of learning Bible. That I've taken most of my learnings have come from Jenny Dean's Wild Color. It's a really fantastic classic for all things dye related. And you've got a couple of books as well, Z, that are your
I wanted to show you. I'm using The Art and Science of Natural Dyes by Joy Buttrop and Catherine Ellis. Catherine Ellis, getting to know her quite a bit with following all her talks and all. I really like this one. It explains a bit deeper into things, but then I've also got Kristen Christine Bay has the modern natural dyer. You know, the
Fantastic.
steps are spelled out quite simply, and it's really good book too. I mean, there's so many books really,
Yeah.
but these two
Yeah.
I seem to go back to quite a bit.
Awesome. Okay.
And we won't talk about the wool. But do you want to show your iron pot?
Well, I was going to say, should we talk at all about iron, because we have not gone over iron, and shall we have like the brief end notes on iron mordanting?
I do think it's important because, I mean, Gall Nut the tannin is so attracted to iron, and it has such a huge change that even if you mark your clothes, you know, because you put some rusty bits have fallen in, or you've got a tiny spot of rust, it really affects your dye. So, and it literally, Gall Nut with iron mix will go black, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so maybe a little talk about iron.
Okay, so iron is an alternate way that you can mordant, and it is called saddening. And I think those are not the crystals. If you were to buy the ferrous sulfite, it's like this dark green.
Yeah, the salts, right? The iron salts.
Erin Fahy uses 4% weight of fiber if she is doing just a straight iron mordant. Now, this is not something you would want to do with wool ever. It's very hard on the wool. But so you would use with wool, you would use an iron modifier at the end of your dye process. But for our mordanting, what you can basically do is cut out all of these steps and just go scour and then into an iron rinse, but it's going to not give you bright tones. It tends to give you very dark, dark prints. In the botanical printing, what's so cool is things like the red currant leaves or raspberry leaves. You get those beautiful black leaf outlines that actually look like pen drawings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you dip them in the iron.
It tends to be more of a monochromatic and on a duller, softer tones. But basically, this iron liquor is take a big glass container. You want to have holes in the top of it, and you put your rusty iron bits in there. You put 1 part vinegar and 2 parts water, and you leave it for about 3 weeks, and it's going to turn orange. And then at that point, you can strain some of this into a pot. That would be a iron dedicated pot. You don't ever, ever, ever want to use your iron pots for other things because of that contamination. As soon as anything tannined touches iron, it goes dark, dark gray, which is great if you want dark, dark gray. But if you're not wanting dark, dark gray, it's going to drive you nuts because you will get iron on things. And this is my enamel pot that actually has a couple of
we can see it when you hold it at a certain angle, the orange at the bottom.
Yeah, so it has, the enamel has cracked off a couple of places. And I have learned by mistake of putting things in here and ending up with these like black spots on cloth. So if you're using an enamel pot, you've got to make sure that it's not, doesn't have any cracks in it that are going to be problematic.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually don't use 4%. I tend to do 2%.
2% is what
I guess always... you could always do the same, you know, like making the soup, just mix and match and do things like that.
Yeah.
And then that's so the difference with the ferrous sulfate, which is the powder, I guess you can, the green actually if you put it in the water, that goes orange. So
yes.
It just looks green. Yeah.
The powder looks green. And then that would be, 2 to 4% your weight of fiber, and you would have your wetted cloth. You're using the dry cloth measurement, and then you put your wet cloth into your iron liquor mix. And I've known people that have just dipped it in for 20 minutes, left it in there,
to show you my pot,
around for 20 minutes, and I've known people that have steamed it and cooked it, whatever. So I think it's really kind of open to interpretation, but that is kind of the most baseline method of mordanting. It won't give you bright colors. So what are you going to show, Z?
This is my pot. Beautiful.
Oh, that is beautiful.
I love that so much.
That's fantastic.
Nobody's allowed to touch it because I'm pretty sure someone would put it in the bin. But that's years of it. So
And it looks like it's had a lot of time over open fires as well.
yes, exactly. But
Nice.
again, potent stuff in there. Use gloves if you're,
Yeah. So what else do we feel like we need to talk about before we say goodbye? Is there anything else on?
No, I think we've covered all the steps. So
I think we
again,
got it.
scouring, tannin, aluminum acetate. Yep, chalking.
And then dye. There's the last look at the list, everyone. Those are the
Yay.
steps. And again, take notes. I'm really, really bad on writing down notes personally on what I put into the dye pot. But what I do is my notes on mordanting, because if things go wrong and you are frustrated by something, you want to be able to track back to what happened. Or if something was beautiful and you want to know what you did, it's the mordanting that really is, I think, the key.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be doing a lot of in the dye guild that we're running this summer. It's going to be about keeping notes and keeping a dye journal, and just because it is really nice to go back and find that color you made, right?
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yay.
All right. And yes, so if you're watching this soon to when we're making it here at the start of May, it's May 10th today, CZarina has her dye guild starting up with us sometime soon that runs into the fall. And registration is open and has already started. So jump in and grab your spot for that soon.
Thanks,
And
Sharon.
thank you, Z, for being online with me this morning to record this.
I know, I had a lovely day too, so I'm sitting outside.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, thanks for teaching this course again for us this year.
Thanks, Sharon.
Bye, everybody.